This is Greg Rand. Welcome back to Rand on Real Estate on 77 WABC. We are talking about smart people saying dumb things about real estate, but now we've got smart people to say smart things about real estate. I have on the phone with me Drew Kessler, who is a mortgage genius. How you doing, Drew?
I'm good. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. It's good to hear from you. Drew is a regular contributor on the Fox News channel because he can pretty much tell you where the mortgage rates are going to be next week. He's more accurate than a weatherman. And he is out there in the field with his finger on the pulse. And we're going to talk a little bit about some home sales numbers that just came out last week. The National Association of Realtors reported what the home sales had been doing, and Drew is going to fill us in on how he sees that playing out in the field. So let me jump into that. National Association of Realtors reported that the April home sales, existing home sales, which are basically houses that have already been built, they're not brand new, that number was up 7.6%. But here's the key. Here's the thing that really gets me. I'm looking at a story in the Wall Street Journal, their rendition of this release of information. It says, home resales rise above expectations in April. Above expectations. And they have an expert. We just got talking in the last segment about how there's lots of experts out there who don't know squat about real estate. And here's one of them. Quote, the government incentives to buy homes worked, but who knows where we go from here. So these are people that, and listen, I love the Wall Street Journal, but they're the Wall Street Journal. They're not the Main Street Journal, and they just don't seem to know, and they don't seem to have a bench of experts like me and Drew to tell you that this was actually very predictable, and we do know where things are going from here. And the key number was that the number of home sales was up 7.6% from March, but we don't care about April compared to March. We care about April compared to last April. That's what matters, and that number was up over 22%. Actually, it was the biggest increase year over year in recorded history, but of course, everybody missed it because they don't know what they're talking about. Mortgage rates being low, Drew, is obviously a key driver of people's willingness to jump off the sidelines. What are you seeing out there in the field?
Well, I mean, it's the ultimate perfect time to buy a house. Housing affordability is at all-time lows. The rates have sustained the under 5% mark that we were seeing at the beginning of the year. The big concern was when the Fed pulled out of buying treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, what would happen to the mortgage market? Would the private sector come back in and buy those mortgage-backed securities and keep rates down? And surprisingly, they have. And rates have sustained the low mark of right around 5% or below 5% for pretty much the past quarter or in the last 2 quarters, even after the government backed out. And the reason for it is because right now most investors are concerned of where the stock market's heading, and they want to put their money in something secure. Traditionally, that goes into bonds. Well, before mortgage-backed securities got a little more less risque, they were just putting them in the T-bills. Now they're moving over to the mortgage-backed securities and keeping the yields on those extremely low, therefore creating low mortgage interest rates.
So that's really interesting. So what you're saying is that the Wall Street experts anticipated that rates would be rising because the government was no longer going to be acquiring these mortgage-backed securities. They were stopping doing that, and the private sector was going to expect higher returns because they perceived it as being a higher risk. But those same Wall Street analysts, in effect, jumped in with both feet and picked up right where the government left off and have been acquiring these things. The rates are actually down over the last few weeks, aren't they?
Yeah, no, rates have dropped below 5%. I mean, depending on how you catch it, it's anywhere between 4.75 and 4.875% nationally on a 30-year fix with 0 points. So the 30-year fix is a phenomenal interest rate right now, and we're looking at historic lows since recordable time started in 1972.
So now the cause and effect of the housing market, those of us that are actually in contact with it, literally in touch with it, we're on the street. You know, when I feel bad for economists who are trying to comment on the housing market because it's like they're looking at a 6-month-old satellite photo, and we have yesterday's satellite photo, and we're standing on the ground looking at the situation on the ground and being able to understand what these things all mean. And I'll give you an example. You know, this headline of home resales rise above expectations. Well, they didn't ask me because our expectation was that it was going to be very, very strong. I've got a clip that I want to play you, not because I want to brag, but because I want to show you that you can trust guys like me and guys like Drew who are in the business, who are putting ourselves out here to advise you on where to go so that you can, and what to do to, in fact, make investments in real estate so you can take advantage of the real estate revival. This is me on Fox News last October. The sales that we did in the last couple of months were much stronger than last year. I can tell you the reports that come out at the end of the early part of the spring are going to be maybe the biggest increase in sales in 20 years. All right, so we knew back in October that the market was beginning to surge. Okay, they're talking in this report here in the Wall Street Journal about how, okay, so we had a good month, and it was probably just because of a government intervention of a tax credit, but now we don't know what's going to happen. In other words, everything we have is a rearview mirror. We don't know what's going to happen, but what I know is that another very important stat in this report is that new listings entering the market are up. Now, Drew, in your experience, is it a new trend these days that people sell a house and then go move into a hollowed out tree, or are they having other plans?
They're definitely, everybody needs the key, and the key is shelter. Everyone needs a roof over their head. And if you sell a house, well, guess what? You might not be buying the next house, but you're moving into another property. Whether you be renting, buying, you're doing something. And most people who are selling right now, if they could afford it and they're not in a distressed situation, are usually looking into buying, again, at all-time lows on the values, and also, taking advantage of these great interest rates.
So what are you seeing out there with actual mortgage borrowers? How has their attitude changed maybe now versus last year?
Well, the biggest thing is the psyche of the current home buyer. A recent study done by Fannie Mae's National Housing Association pinpointed that about 60% of the population out there feel it's harder today to get a mortgage than when their parents applied for a mortgage. And the sheer thought of that is actually crazy. And unfortunately, it's the media, and it's really what these people are reading that's going to deter them from potentially making the jump into home ownership, because they think it's such a hard process. Now, what is different from last year or 2 years or 3 years ago is the amount of documentation you need to provide to a bank to be able to get financing.
Yeah, you have to have a job, you have to have an income, you have to have a good credit score, you have to have a down payment, right?
But the beauty is you don't need a good credit score, you don't need to have a large down payment to be able to apply for a mortgage and get the financing. The government has a program that's sponsored by HUD. It's called FHA, Federal Housing Administration's Loan. They offer up to 96.5% financing, so you need as little as 3.5% down. They'll take a credit score that's even below a 620. National average right now is about a 660. To have a 620 credit score, you definitely don't have the best score in the world, and you can still apply for a mortgage.
I gotta close it up here, but the myth of there's no mortgage money out there is definitely a myth. Real quick, what are the rates going to be in a week, Drew?
We're going to look at flat rates right now. We're going to be looking at, give or take, a window probably 4.75 up to 5%, depending on how you catch it. But I think next week we're going to be looking right around 4.875 on the 30-year fixed at 0 points.
Okay, you can bank on that. This is Rand on Real Estate. Thank you, Drew Kessler. You're listening to 77 WABC. Come see us on the website, randonrealestate.com.